All right, welcome to the Global Phys Ed Voxcast. I'm sitting here with Brandon Herwick. Brandon, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's great to talk to you, Jorge. And I said before we got on here, I might want to flip the script and ask you a few questions about world travel now that you're an international citizen for real.
Yeah, we could totally get into that later. But first, I want to know a little bit about you. Tell me about yourself. How did you get into teaching? How did you become a physical education teacher?
So teaching is in my blood. My dad was a art teacher, then a fourth grade teacher, then a first grade teacher, and now he teaches sixth grade social studies. My mom's a kindergarten teacher for life, and my grandmother was a secretary in a school. So I grew up like running down to my dad's classroom to get like permission slips I had forgotten signed, and taking helping him put up and take down the bulletin board. So education was always kind of maybe in my path. When I was like, I don't know, a few, maybe like 2 years old, I was like doing sit-ups, and my mom's like, "You're going to be a physical education teacher." I've learned a little bit more about physical literacy since then. But so I
At
went
2 years
to,
old, you were doing sit-ups at 2 years old.
yeah, apparently I had some intense core strength as a toddler.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah. So, and then I decided to become a phys ed teacher. My dad and I, it was senior year, and I was going to go in three paths. I was either going to become a music theater major and become an actor because I really love Broadway. I was going to become a pastry chef, and I had already gone to some of the local culinary schools to see like what their programs are like. I was going to become a physical education teacher, and we're like having a table tennis match, and like it's almost like a scene from a movie because we were like ping-ponging ideas back as we were, kind of rallying with the actual game. But what we kind of came up with is that teaching can kind of be theater, and if I really did want to act on stage, I could do it in the summers. And then, what I loved about being a pastry chef or cooking or baking is that you can create on. Sometimes recipes work and sometimes they don't, but by adding different things and trying new things out, you can make new creations. So I think I totally take that creative side into my teaching. And then of course, being a physical education teacher is one of the best jobs in the world. So I went to community college. I got my associates at Hudson Valley Community College, and then I went to the State University of New York at Cortland, got my bachelor's in physical education with a concentration in adapted physical education, and then I did my master's online in health studies through the University of Alabama. Roll Tide.
Awesome. Okay, so we gotta roll it back a little bit here.
Okay.
Pastry chef, tell me about. See, before we started the podcast, I was going to tell. I told you that I'm going to learn some things about you. I'm going to ask those. I'm going to ask you about those things. Pastry chef.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Tell me about your history as a pastry chef. How did that even come about?
So part of it is kind of like maybe the strengthening part of my story in that I was like super overweight as a kid. So maybe I had an unhealthy relationship with sweets and pastries. I was like 200 pounds by the age of 13, and like it kind of like messed with my mindset a little bit, and having a growth mindset and how mainly on how people reacted to me. I always felt pretty confident, but it got me down on how people reacted to me because of that. But the positive side about pastry chef is my godfather, my uncle, he really liked to bake. So he started teaching me how to make like Easter egg bread and how to braid bread. And I always enjoy making cookies and pies around the holidays. So I just really love the idea of being able to work with your hands, take these raw ingredients, put them together, create something, and then share it with other people, and then have them enjoy that. Food literally gives life. So I love that aspect of it too.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, do you still do you still cook? Do you still bake?
I still really love to cook. I don't bake as much as I'd like. I grill a lot, but I've been known to bake from time to time around the holidays. But I really have felt that like all the creativity that I wanted to put towards that has been kind of funneled into teaching. I love watching The Chef's Table on Netflix,
Hmm.
which is like kind of this in-depth look into a chef and then how they work and how they run their kitchen and their backstory. And I love that show because it really shows how all of us have a story and everything kind of makes sense. If you look at that story, where we are, and it kind of informs where we want to go. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, uh, a show that my daughter and I love to watch on Netflix is Nailed It. Have you seen that show?
No, I haven't seen that yet.
It's
What is that
so
about?
funny. It's so funny. So they get these like amateur chefs, right? Or people that like to bake at home, and
Yeah.
they ask them to bake like this amazing cake, with fondant and like a little chocolate statue on top, and just outrageous amazing cake, right? And
Yeah.
like an hour and a half to bake it. And these people have never done any of that kind of baking or cooking before in their lives. And
Oh,
so they bake the cake, and then they compare it to the like professional chef's cake. It's hilarious.
that's
It's so
cool.
funny. And so they call it nailed it because it's that internet meme where it's like, nailed it.
What an interesting concept. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's hilarious. You'd be awesome on that. You should apply.
That would imagine. Like I saw that you had the Ninja Warrior from
Yeah,
California,
Sandy Zimmerman.
from
She was
Washington
amazing.
on, yeah,
Yeah.
Washington from, yeah. Maybe I'll have to do a reprisal on the show after I've won or totally bombed on Nailed It.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That would be
We'd be
cool.
rooting for you for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so tell me about, you said you had an unhealthy relationship with food as a young kid. Tell me about that. What did you learn from that experience as a young kid, and how do you take that and kind of share that information with your students now?
Let me preface by saying I have two very loving parents, but I think they were kind of misinformed as to what was healthy and what wasn't healthy. I was having a conversation with my uncle a few months ago, and he was talking about when he went to a nutrition class. They were talking about if you took that same nutrition class like 10 years apart, in the first class they would tell you that it was the butter on the egg, on the egg white that was, or the egg, that was unhealthy. And then if you took that class 10 years later, they'd tell you that the bagel was the actual unhealthy part and everything else was healthy. So, I think it was kind of some of that misinformed information. So, regularly I'd have like two or three like dripping buttered bagels for breakfast. And then, calzone Fridays were my favorite because it was one calzone, and then maybe like they had an extra, so I'd like grab another calzone on the way out. And you
Yeah.
know I really enjoyed like Hostess cookies and things like that. And I think I still like to indulge and have certain treats now, but it was totally um, a misunderstanding of having a wide range of things within my diet, and then having like proportions.
Hmm.
I would eat a lot, and I think that was like my mom loved to cook and my grandfather loved to cook. He was Turkish, from Turkey, moved over. So I think for him, like whenever we went over there, it was like whatever time it was, it's like, all right, we're gonna make food. It would either be a huge pancake with a ton of syrup, or it would be he's making like some kind of steak he'd have in the oven for a long time, or so it was just was a way to show love, and there wasn't really any checks or balances on the amount of food that I could have. So I just totally overindulged.
So again, like what are some of the sort of lessons that you can share with
All
your
right.
students about your experiences?
So twofold. Like one, I mentioned earlier, like being a little like overweight. I still felt very athletic. Like there are a lot of times at recess where like they'd look, other kids would look at me and be like, "Oh, he's not going to catch me," and we'd play like a flag football or something like that, and I'd be just super fast. It was just I just had a bigger body. But I had a coach when I was in a basketball camp one time where I wouldn't do this now, but he said, if any one of you can do 25 or 30 push-ups, and the rest of the group doesn't have to do it. And of course, I was like, pick me, like I want to do it, and I was the only one raising my hand, to which he goes, all right, well, let's just have everyone do it. Because he was like, I guess he was afraid that I was going to fail.
Right.
And maybe he was trying to save me some embarrassment. So some of the lessons I learned from that is that, there might be some students in my class that maybe perceived as not being the healthiest or not being able. And I
Mhm.
try to treat everyone as having the same ability and challenge them at their level. And then, I talk a lot with my students about maintaining that balance. Joey Fife talks about live your adventure and how he's so inspired by that. And I think that's a really great way to get into physical literacy, but it's also a reminder for our students all the time as, hey, we want to have healthy bodies so we can do so many things. If somebody says, hey, you want to go for a hike? We want to be able to do that. So I talk about balance with my students. I try to approach everyone with an open mind. And then, we talk about the importance of having a healthier body and how when we treat our body right, it gives us, a better ability to do more things for longer.
So when do you think it switched for you? When did you start, learning more about nutrition and then applying it to yourself?
I say I lost all my weight in one day because it was a day in the summer. Really joining the football team was like a big thing because it was the first organized sport I was part of. I was part of a little league team, but my big highlight was getting hit by the ball, walking to first, not realizing I couldn't steal second, and like getting tagged out. So football was the first time where the coaches actually like paid attention to me and kind of invested in me, and that really empowered me. At the same time, I started doing a lot of yard work for my neighbors, so getting active in that way. And then I think joining high school and taking a nutrition class and becoming more aware that what you put in your body is fuel, and has consequences, good and bad. It was really one summer, and all those things just kind of came together my freshman year of high school. And then I have to say, like going into music theater, like having a core group of people that really encouraged me, helped me kind of realize that it's important to invest in yourself as well,
Okay, so good transition into music theater. Tell me about your days as an actor.
Well, there weren't many outside of high school, but in high school, in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I kind of played small roles or multiple roles in the school play, and I just love the camaraderie that it brought within the music theater group. If you've ever been part of a drama club, there is a lot of drama, but there's also like a lot of warm feelings. Yeah. And then going into my freshman year, I played minor roles, and then my sophomore year, I played Curly McLean, which is like the main lead in Oklahoma. Uh-huh. And it really gave me like such a boost because my graduating class was maybe 96. So I was in a group of students where I could run from football practice to audition for the school play and still go to Spanish club after that. So I think for me, I played Reb Tevye my senior year, and then I played Danny Zuko in my junior year. And I try to carry a lot of those like fun aspects into my class. Where, sometimes I'll start the lesson just by singing, an improvised version of like Godspell, but I'll make the lyrics like the cues to throwing and catching, and it like,
cool.
Yeah. Or like, with my first graders, I'll like go behind our cart, and then all of a sudden, like I'll turn Beauty and the Beast on, and there's a new song in the live action Beauty and the Beast where it's like called Evermore. And like, I'll mouth it. I was the one who had it all. And all of a sudden, like the engagement is there, and I'll act it out and we'll start class. But
that's awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask you, how do you use your acting in your class? But is that something that you feel like you've always been comfortable on stage, and that it's sort of like a natural fit with being a PE teacher, right? Because yeah. To a certain extent, you don't necessarily always want to be on stage, but to a certain extent, to get the kids really engaged and really going, sometimes it helps to be a little more enthusiastic while you're on stage.
Yes. I think one of the big things that music theater taught me was just like to embrace emotion, and then also to be very aware in the moment. I've been able to do a few keynotes and a few presentations, and certainly it happens in my class where I'll do this big build up and I'll kind of talk about something, and then I'll pause. And that pause, when everyone's there and everyone's collectively thinking about the same thing, I'm just, so excited about the next thing we're doing. Like, I live for those moments, because I mean, really, that's what I get out of physical activity. It's what I get out of health. It's like feeling that high just by living, just by embracing living to the fullest,
Yeah, definitely. I read the thing that you did for Joey Fight's website, the How You Teach.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And part of it said that you really enjoy storytelling in your class. Tell me about that. How do you use storytelling in your class?
So, have you ever been to Epcot in Walt
Yeah.
Disney World?
Uh-huh.
So, I love going on Spaceship Earth, which is the ride inside the big globe, right? It's
Oh
it's
yeah,
like a
yeah.
small ride. You're making your way up, and it kind of talks about like the history of technology, and it starts with cave paintings, and then it goes into like Gutenberg's printing press, and then it goes but before that,
Yeah.
it's
So
yeah.
I gotta tell you a little something that happened in that in the
Uh-oh.
no, not bad, not bad. But we went to Disney World a few years ago,
Yeah.
and a couple years ago, I don't know, with our kids. It was like 3 years ago now. And we did the Magic Kingdom first, and
Okay.
we went like all out. We stayed up late, and we were out all day, and the next day we were absolutely exhausted, and so we went to Epcot, and
Yeah.
we got on that ride, and me and my wife totally fell asleep on there.
No.
So when you're talking about it, I missed like half of it, so I just had to throw that in there.
Uh, oh, that's awesome. Well, my cousin actually proposed at the end of that ride.
No way.
Yeah, at the end where it takes a picture of your face and then it kind of puts you in like a world, like a futuristic world
Oh,
where
yeah, I
you're either
remember.
in a city or at the end, like it was something, the line is like, the future of tomorrow, sponsored by whoever the sponsor is. And I think that's where he goes, like, will you live your tomorrow with me or something like that?
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So I always joke with him that he never really asked her to be his wife. He just said, will you live your tomorrow with me? So, but they still said I
Yeah,
do. But
that could be anything. Yeah, so
yeah.
I was asleep probably for half of that ride.
Oh man, well you got to go again because they use animatronics to talk about kind of the history of technology, but more of the history of the transfer of communication.
Oh, right.
So storytelling to me is such a special way to give a lesson. You can stand up there and you can just kind of give the directions and then get an activity and the students could get something out of it. But one of the best examples I like to give is most people know, that Dr. James Naismith created basketball.
Hmm.
Right? He did it. Most of the facts they know is he did it probably at Springfield College. He nailed peach baskets on the wall, right? But what I love to tell my students is that there's an interview that just came out with him that, do you know why he created that game? He created the game because there was a snowstorm and he had a group of football players that for like 3 or 4 days were stuck inside. They couldn't get outside. So he goes, I need to do something to get them active because they're just driving me crazy. So he actually wanted boxes. They didn't have any boxes. They had these peach baskets. So he nails them to the wall. He throws out an old volleyball or old soccer ball, depending on who you ask. And the very first game of basketball, there were no rules. So they're running around. 2 people broke their collarbone. 3 people got knocked out, and like 4 of them got black eyes.
Oh,
And he goes, I'm never playing this game again. Until they kept pestering him. They were bugging him. We got to play. We got to play. And he goes, well, I knew I needed to create some rules. So I told them they couldn't dribble with the ball. And the first game of basketball was made. And he goes, it just goes to show you what's possible when you have to do something. So I love telling that story because 35 or 40 years after he created it, it was in the Olympics.
wow.
And then I like to tell that during basketball, but I also like to tell it when we do a creative games unit because I go, imagine if the game we play today is in the Olympics in 30 years.
Yeah.
And, it just adds so much more. And then, then you get into like, well, here's a ball. Imagine you've never shot this before. How do you think you would do it? And they go, well, I'd put one hand on the side and one hand on the back and I'd flick my wrist and I'd follow through. I go, no, you don't know any of those cues. You've never done it before.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really special part. And there's so many educators within our field that do it so well. Jim DeLine and, Chip and John Smith and, Crystal Horowitz. And there's just so many great storytellers. I think it adds so much more to your teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that idea of game creation, like you said, because it puts it sort of puts the onus on the students to figure out how to play those games because they're creating those games, right? They're creating them for themselves, and then they have to figure out the rules of the games, the cues that they might use to play those games, and all aspects of it. So that's another really, I think, important important aspect of what you were just talking about, in putting that responsibility back on the kids and having them be the drivers of that learning. How do you do that in your classroom? I know that there has to sort of be a balance. You know, we're talking about the storytelling aspect of it, the engagement aspect of it, and you kind of being that actor to start that provocation. But then at some point you got to let it go, right? You got to give it back to the kids, right? So how do
Yeah.
you do that? How do you balance that in your class?
So usually they're coming in, they're doing some kind of instant activity.
Mm,
After that, I last year I implemented. Will Potter has these posters that have different scientists and artists and mathematicians and athletes, and it has the year they were born and if they've passed away, a quote from them, and like a bio. So usually that'll be the second thing I do. Each week I'll feature one of them, and I say we're going to meet somebody new today. And that's kind of our inspiration, and that's our quote that we're going to try to follow through the week. I teach 2 45-minute periods. So we'll talk about that maybe for 5 minutes, and then we're going into the next activity, whether it be a skill development or a fitness concept. This past year, I tried to do, for the first like 2 or 3 months of school, I tried to do a different fitness skill every month.
mm,
So we had 6 classes where we were just working on, or 4 classes where we were just working on, no, 8 classes we were working on perfect air squat. So we talk about, and I teach elementary, so we're talking about thumbs out, who's awesome? I'm super cool. I'm awesome. Then we trace it down to the ankles, and then we talk about blocking out the sun, and that keeps the chest up. We'll squat all the way down as low as we can. We come back up. We put our hands on our hips, and we go do 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 do, just like a superhero. So that would be like a quick 2-minute thing, and then maybe that's where I go into a story talking about if we're talking about a specific sport or sports skill or concept for the day. But I think it really just comes with time, and I think your students will remind you too. I Joey Fife, Andy Hare, Mel Hamada, and then Andy Milne on Andy, who raps,
Horn.
Andy Horn.
Andy
They
Horn.
just did the keynotes at P Institute,
Yeah.
and they each gave a really awesome bit within their keynote about being vulnerable, and I think that's really important. I learned early on when I taught in Brooklyn, like I need to apologize and I need to admit when I've gone too long. There's been 1 or 2 times in class where I'll start talking about like the proper throwing technique, and then somehow that'll lead to recycling, and then that'll lead to like how many t-shirts are being created in the world, and how there's no proper way to dispose of those, and how landfills are getting overfilled, and then water filtration. And I'm like, my heart is getting elevated, and I'm talking faster, and I'm like, yes, this is the reason I'm teaching. This is so much great information. And then my kindergarten or first grade students will raise their hand and go, Mr. Herwick, can we just play the game now? So I think, they'll tell you too when it's time, but spending just 2 or 3 minutes on it can be so impactful. And I think the more you do it, the more you realize it really just needs to be, 2 minutes or 3 minutes tops. And then you get into the skill,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
enough to really add importance to what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. Well, now I teach kindergarten. I only teach kindergarten, and
Wow.
yeah, it took some to, but once I got into the groove, it's like it's the best thing ever because they're super honest, they're super
Yeah.
enthusiastic, and
Yes.
to go along with that honesty, one time I was talking a little bit too much, and I try to get them going as soon as possible. Like they might sit for like 30 seconds to 45 seconds before we start doing some sort of activity. You know what I mean? I just got to give them their quick, like what I try to do is I try to scaffold everything, right? So I try to give them a very, very quick activity with a couple rules, and then they get going. And then as they're going, we build from there. So then I'll add one more rule, then I'll add another rule, and so on, right? But I was talking a little bit too much this time, right? And a little girl raises her hand. Oh no, I'm sorry, she doesn't even raise her hand. I'm talking, I'm going, and a little girl goes, boring. And so immediately I was kind of like taken aback and like, should I be mad at this? And then I thought,
Yeah.
well, she's telling me that I'm being boring. I just keep
Right.
talking. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. Let's get going. Let's do this thing. But it's like they have no filter, you know?
No. And kudos to you for just kind of taking that and being like, you know what? You're absolutely right.
Well, I mean, I could have gotten mad, or I could
Yeah.
have taken that as sort of constructive criticism in their own way of giving it. And I
Right.
chose to do it that way. And I said, you know what? You're right. Let's keep going.
That
But it was a
now
good
is,
lesson for me too, you know?
yeah, no, absolutely. Now, I have a few questions really quick about kindergarten. Is there another phrase? Because you're in Dubai,
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. Okay. In Saudi Arabia, is there a different phrase in the beginning of the year than herding cats for kindergarten, or do they use that as well?
No, I mean, well, okay, so I'm in an international school, and there's kids from all over the world. I think there's like 90 different nationalities represented in the school, so they're
Wow.
literally from all over the world. And it's an English speaking international school, so a lot of the phrases and things that they use do come from the United States, or that
Okay.
sort of culture. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
herding cats is pretty accurate, especially in the beginning, especially with a few classes. Some classes are a little bit more disciplined than others, but ours is also a play based kindergarten. And so
Oh
we
yeah.
have K1, K2, K3. So it goes from 3 year olds to 6 year olds. And I am K3. So I
Okay.
have the 5 and 6 year olds. So yeah, especially some of those 3 year olds are a handful.
Oh, they're babies. Yeah. That's now you work with Andy Vasily.
Yeah,
I've seen some incredible looking graphics or charts that he's put out in
yeah,
planning his
yeah.
teaching, right? Like,
He loves his charts.
do you use those?
Yeah, yeah. So what we do is we'll map out a unit, and so we have the charts, and then we have the different concepts that we're going to be hitting throughout the unit. So let's say we have a 6 or 8 week unit. We'll
Okay.
we'll break it down into weeks, and then we'll try to fit in which concepts we want to hit at different parts of the unit, right? So if we think the kids need to learn the concept of community before we get to sort of like individual play or something like that, then we focus on that the first week, maybe two, see how they do, and then start going into other things. So that's basically how we map out our unit.
How aware are the students of that? Right? Like, and I ask because I feel like a lot of times, like in the middle of class, I'll find myself saying, like, well, I'm explaining this to your students because this is skill development and skill, like, and
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes, like, I'll almost expose the blueprint of, the architecture I'm trying to build a little bit. And
yeah.
especially in kindergarten, that's like, that's right over their head, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, so what I try to do is I try to whatever products we create during that part of the unit, I'll put it up on the wall, right? So if we are, I'm trying to think of a good example. If we're talking about how to be, what's a good example? If we're talking about like how to be a good friend, and the
okay.
kids are kind of breaking that down, and what I'll try to do is I'll try to write down their responses on a simple question like how to be a good friend, and then I'll try to make a visual out of it, right? And then maybe categorize them into two or three different aspects, and then put that up on the wall so we can always kind of refer back to it. And so when we talked about a specific concept and broke it down, this is what that concept looks like, and then we'll always kind of refer back to it. And then the following week or a couple weeks down the road, we might do a different concept, and then I'll put the visual of whatever we talked about or kind of unpacked as a group on the wall as well. And so it kind of refer back to being a good friend, and then how we communicate, right? And then the next concept will go up on the wall as well. So I try to do that as best I can. So I don't necessarily unveil the whole unit all at once, and kind of like you said, like the architecture behind it. But I do kind of make it as visual as possible to kind of always refer back to what we had learned and what we had talked about in the past. Does that make sense?
I like that. Yeah. So it's more of like, here's a summary of what we've done,
Yeah,
which may indicate where we're going, but I'm not necessarily describing that all to you. We're creating it together.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
I
then we
like
always we always have a reference point back, and then we try to bring it all together at the end. Yeah,
I like that. I like that a lot.
yeah,
That's cool. I got to come visit.
yeah. Whenever you're in the area.
I'll just stop by. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool place to work. I mean, everybody here is like, I've learned so much from the people around here. They're all brilliant. And then
Yeah.
getting a chance to work with Andy so closely, it's amazing because he's like, I don't know, he's amazing. He's awesome. He's so knowledgeable, and he's so passionate about what he does, and it definitely like uh 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 you know makes us a little bit more enthusiastic as well. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
he's great. He's great at what he does. Okay, so we talked about vulnerability.
Yeah.
We talked about being vulnerable, and I think that's huge. And I know you do a lot with dance, and dance is
Yeah.
one of those things that is hard for some people. I mean, me included, right? So
Yeah.
I'm not very comfortable like demonstrating dances and things like that. One thing that I did to kind of help me with that whole dance aspect was when I was working in the States. I used a lot of jigsaw and cooperative
Yeah.
learning, so the kids could kind of choreograph their own dance and kind of again put it back on the kids to kind of be those kind of lead that direction, right?
Yeah.
Where does that come from for you? Being vulnerable and being able to, dance. Has that always been a natural thing for you? Is that kind of going back to what you learned from acting? Like how did that become a part of what you do in PE?
I think, you only need three things to be a good dance educator or just to teach dance, right? Like you need a pulse, right? So you need to be able to like find that. So if you have a pulse, then you're already on your way. The second is, I think, like we were talking about, you need to be not afraid to make mistakes and just be really in tune with the joy that can be movement, right? And then third, you like some of the things you have to put a little time just to remember certain steps. Like I just saw Andy Hare do dance play, and then I saw Michelle Hillier do groove. And everyone was raving about both of those, but especially in Michelle's with groove, like one woman was like, I've never been able to feel confident doing dance. And I feel so comfortable and confident in this because basically it was move around the room and snap to the music. Then it was move around the room and clap and then move your head and then stop. And we're going to do a little move and then it's move around again. So I think if you can identify the aspects of what you feel comfortable with physically within dance, and then branch off from there, it becomes a lot easier for you. For me, I always loved to dance, and I always loved the way music can make me feel. Like I have a playlist on Spotify that I love to listen. It's called Love to Listen To. And like one song's like That's Christmas to Me from Pentatonics, which is like a Christmas song that I'll listen to in July. Another one is just it's a song from like the Harry Potter musical that's on, The Cursed Child. And I don't know, it's a random assortment, but they all go together because as soon as I turn them on, they make me feel a certain way.
Mm.
And I think that's why I love to dance. I love to go to weddings and like dance with people that don't necessarily feel comfortable dancing, because I'll take their move, I'll do it, and then they try to do my move, and I'm like, no, that was your move to begin with. Like people inherently are good at dancing, I feel like, as long as you're enjoying it. I tend to go more towards folk dances because I love the stories of them. Like, for me, I have the world record at James Madison University Health and PE Physical Activity Institute in the Kinderpolka. It's the world record because I say it's the world record. Like it's not Guinness certified. There was like 300 people doing it. But what I love about the Kinderpolka is it's a German dance that is about mocking adults, the original version. Like you take a step and then it's like, no, can I have this? No. Can I do this? No. That was the original motivation for the dance, but I took that and I made it a positive spin. So at the end of the dance, instead of saying nya, 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 you say, you are awesome, you are awesome. And that's why I love cultural dances, because you can take steps that have been in some variation or another. They've been performed sometimes for thousands of years, and just by modernizing the music or changing it a little bit or adapting this, you could totally make it new and just add to the legacy of that dance.
Yeah.
I dance with the dancers, and it's really difficult sometimes because they're like, oh, Brandon, like you choreograph the next one, and like don't tell anyone. But like that's not always easy for me. Like to choreograph a dance from scratch takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
You got to listen to the music, you got to sight it out, you got to say, here's an 8 count, here's an 8 count, what are we doing from here? Then come up with the original move. I think the music can indicate that sometimes, but for me, like I love to be inspired by other people for the choreography, and then I lean more towards that free movement and cultural because of the way it makes me feel, and then the storytelling behind those aspects of it.
So you talked about the way music makes you feel, and to a certain extent, you have to be very sort of again, very vulnerable, right? And very attuned to how that music, you have to allow it to make you feel a certain way, right?
That's true.
So a lot of kids, I noticed when I was teaching, elementary, fourth and fifth grade, they start being a little bit more self-conscious about about their peers and what they think of them and what how they view them.
Yeah.
How do you get a fourth grader or fifth grader who might be super self-conscious? Maybe somebody made fun of them. Maybe they
Yeah.
have a bit of trauma that they're dealing with to be vulnerable enough to feel the music.
Yeah, I think the first step is to lead them in an activity in which there's not a lot of opportunity to see each other, right? Like whether it be like Michelle does or like Dance Play does, like move around open space and just so you can choose to just walk around. And inherently you're probably going to start walking and bouncing a little bit, right? So that's one start. Just playing music while you're doing an activity or playing music and then having them move to that. Shout out to Scott Williams and shout out to Dan Tennyson because they both contributed to like separate activities to open that achieve similar things in that one's called Trolls Tag and one's called Safety Dance. Trolls Tag goes off the basis of the movie Trolls, that Bergens are kind of these like sad, moping people that walk around and they feel like the only way to get happy, right, is to eat the trolls. But the trolls know that's not true. They know you can hug, which we don't hug in physical education class most of the time. They can sing. You're welcome to sing as long as I'm not giving instructions. Or you can dance. So basically it's a tag game where if you get tagged, you go to one of the four walls and either you perform 8 counts or 8 seconds of the dance that's on the wall. So there's like a activity card that has a dance move, or you perform your own dance. I've done that from like 3 or 4-year-olds all the way up to, I don't know, 50, 60, 7-year-olds. I've never had anyone not dance.
Really?
Because there's no pressure. Like in order to get back in the game, you just, even if it's like a little move and groove, just a little shoulder bop or a little hip groove, everyone does something.
Yeah.
Right? Because you've eliminated that. It's not look at me dancing. It's, well, I want to get back in the tag game. Let me just do something. So, I mean, I don't know if there's anyone in the world who hasn't sang a little bit in the shower or in the car or like bopped their head to something, The other one, Safety Dance, is where it's written up for middle school, but you can do it in any grade. It's where if you don't want to get tagged, you have to dance. So dancing is your shield. So, and it could be any movement. It could just be like a finger wag, it could be like a groovy, like finger bop, from diagonally up and down, like disco. It could be anything. But that's also, I did it with a middle school and a high school class, and some of them were kind of like giggling and stuff like that. But even still, like they don't want to get tagged. So they do a little dance and then they're back in the game. So I think starting with a game is that dance? Kind of, yeah, you're dancing during a tag game. That makes it so much easier when we go, all right, well, we're going to do a Virginia reel, or we're going to have you create, like you're saying, like a jigsaw. You come up with a move, you come up with a move, you do, and then we'll put it together. It's like the segue into that,
Yeah. Have you ever run into any kind of cultural problems with students maybe not being comfortable with dance, maybe being more comfortable with something else, maybe some sort of creative movement or something like that? But have you ever run into any cultural problems with that?
That's a great question. I did have one student once, and I think they kind of like, we were doing a dance activity and they froze in the middle and they go, wait, is this dancing? And I said, no, we're kind of doing more rhythmic movement. And like, I didn't want to lie to them because we were going to get to more formal dances, which they did sit out on, but like they were having an awesome time just moving to the music. So I have had that once. I've also had one student who was going through a really tough time of life, and maybe we transitioned too fast into like a Virginia reel or into like a choreographed dance or into something else. And they're just like, I'm not doing this. And you go, oh, come on. Like you could be my partner. Nope. Okay. Well, it would be better with you, but that's your choice. Come and sit right here and just watch, and there have been students who have done that and they're like, all right, I can do this. And they've gotten back in. And then there's students who just sat out the whole class, and that's okay because a lot of our students, right, are going through things we have no idea that are going on. and maybe something terrible happened that morning or that day, and like they're just not able, they're blocked to the emotion of feeling that activity.
Yeah.
So how, I can't force them to do that. There are times where, maybe certain things have happened to me and I'm not, a song I like will come on and I'll turn it off or change it because I'm not in the right mindset in order to be able to embrace that. But
Hmm.
I think that's okay. I think we have such a tremendous opportunity as physical education teachers to connect, to get to know our students, and then be able to read those signs and go on a journey with them, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's real important, that connection part. So you talked about, you mentioned Open Phys Ed, and it seems
Yeah.
like Open's everywhere now. I see them everywhere, and all the,
Yeah.
I try to follow the conferences as much as I can over here in
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, and kind of like live through you guys. And they had a huge presence at Shape. You guys
Yeah.
had a huge presence at the PE Institute. You have a huge presence on all these different conferences that I try to follow. Tell me a little bit about Open. What is Open, and how can people kind of connect with Open?
Yeah. So Open PhysEd, well, openphysed.org. Open stands for the Online Physical Education Network. On the real brief story, make a long story short or short story long, which however this goes. Aaron Hart taught in the Bronx. And in the Bronx, he was in the school he was in, and the schools around him, they didn't have a lot of money. And they certainly didn't have a lot of money for curriculum. And Aaron, since then, had worked with, several other curriculum projects and was able to build those. But he said to himself, if there's ever an opportunity in which I can create a free curriculum and give it to teachers so that they have a high quality experience for their students, I want to do it. So the opportunity came, he met with US Games and he said, hey, I want to create a free curriculum and I want you to pay for it. And they said, all right, well, let's talk over lunch. And after lunch, they said, all right, we're going to commit $500,000 the first year and $1 million the second year. And it was really a leap of faith for them to do this because obviously the idea is that they want to create relationships and sell more equipment. But the more equipment they sell, the more opportunity is to send teachers out.
Yeah.
So since then, this is 4 years, I think 4 years in now. So Open, each month there's like at least 1 or 2 or 3 modules coming out. They're all tied back to the Shape America standards. They have teaching cues. They have student outcomes. They're tied back to Marzano, Webb's, and Bloom's. They have depth of knowledge questions. There's a strategy focus, which is for Marzano, I think, or, they all have universal design learning adaptations. And really the goal of Open is to provide equity of access, to advocate for physical education as a whole, and empower teachers to be their best selves, because not all teachers have enough time to create all the resources. So Open does a lot of that for you. It comes in a PDF or a Word. So, if you want to change something like on the academic language cards, if you have a population of students that don't have John, Mary, Sarah, and Bill, you could change it to a student in your class. Hey, Jorge did a great job in class, so I'm going to put him on the next academic language card. So next time we talk about health-related fitness components, Jorge worked on his health-related fitness components by doing, this activity or whatever. Yeah. So Open's been a huge thing to empower me, because I was able to help write the K-2, 3-5 middle school, and we're working on the high school dance modules. It's kind of empowered me to do a lot of research in order to be able to do that. How do you create 8 activities where somebody who feels really confident about dance can learn something, and then somebody who's never done dance can get something as well, and kind of make it digestible for them?
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so back to how somebody can get a hold of the curriculum. I think you said it was just openphysed.org. Is that what people would search for?
Yeah, so go to openphysed.org.
Yeah.
There's going to be a new homepage coming soon, but on the top right, there's like a login or sign up. You click on the sign up, you fill in your information. Don't make it super hard. You don't have to share any information because it's free, so there's no credit card or anything. Put in your username that you choose. I just put B Herwick, and then put in your password that you can easily remember. Put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If someone takes it, someone says, "Can I just use yours?" No, create your own, and that way, it shows how many people are using it, but also so you can easily access it. Put in your school information, and then click register, and then you're registered. And then under the curriculum resources, it's separated into K-2, 3-5, middle school and high school. click on whatever level you teach, hover over, and then I think for K through 2 and 3 through 5, there's almost 30 modules, I think, and modules are like units.
Mm-hmm.
And then for middle school and high school, I think there's 8 to 10 each, more coming out every month. And again, it has less activities, activity plans, activity cards. There's quizzes, so academic language quizzes you can use for every module. There's academic language cards you can print out. A lot of them have visuals you can print out and use. And then a lot of them have depth of knowledge, exit slips, and things like that. And I say, open could be really overwhelming as you log on. You go, there's a lot here. Look at the lesson plan and try to implement one new thing. I tell a lot of people, if you drink soda and you want to lose weight, the first thing you could do is stop drinking soda, right? Like cut out sugar from, a lot of sugary things from your diet. If you want to make your teaching like 100 times better right away, have depth of knowledge questions or some kind of higher level thinking questioning at the end of either every activity or at the end of your lesson. And that's really going to drive home the learning. Instead of, hey guys, we did this activity. All right, have a great day. Hey, we did this activity. What did you think about this? How did this apply to this? Yeah. How can this relate to this? And what do you think we're going to do next time with this? Boom, your teaching is going to become amazing. So much more about learning than it was before.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's awesome that it's a free resource that that everybody can have access to. So I think that's a great way to because I like you said before, there's some teachers out there, there's some schools out there that don't have anything, right? Yeah. And much less money to buy a curriculum. And so the fact that this is a free resource to teachers everywhere, I think is a really, really awesome thing.
Yeah. The 3 core values of open are teachers helping teachers, inspiring and defending loyalty and trust, and questioning the status quo. And it's made me reflect a little bit on what my core values are, but it really is that. All the curriculum resources are created by teachers to help teachers. It's about just inspiring and defending loyalty and trust in great teaching practices, and then questioning things. There have been things since using open where I've said, well, I do something this way, and I question it. Should I be doing it that way? Yeah. There were a lot of Twitter conversations saying, oh, I love this game. And then somebody will shoot out, well, what standard does that hit? And everyone goes, oh, There are some games that are just great to engage your students. How much better if, and a lot of the open activities do this, almost all, they tie back to the standard and say, hey, here's where the learning's coming from as you're engaging your students with fun. So yeah, it's helped me grow as a teacher, and I would totally recommend try for free. Yeah. This is, hey, act now. If you subscribe to this podcast, you'll get open. Wait for it for free.
For free, absolutely free.
Yeah, that's right.
Use the code VoxCast. No.
That's right. Yeah, no, you can. It'll still be fun.
I'm gonna change directions here.
Okay.
I believe I saw this on Facebook. Correct me if I'm wrong. It might have been on Facebook. But do you collect bonsai trees? You have something to do with bonsai trees. What is going on with the bonsai trees?
So I went for the last 4 or 5 years. I've been going to a Renaissance fair. Mm-hmm. And for all the listeners out there, right? If you've never been to a Renaissance fair, first prepare yourself. Ask a friend to accompany you, because you need like a witness of what you're about to experience, and then go and attend. Do
you get all dressed up?
This year we are. So I'm like growing my hair out now so I can braid it this year. It's gonna be intense. Yeah, it's gonna be intense. Awesome. But yeah, I'll send pictures. I'll post pictures. So for the last 4 or 5 years, there's been these bonsai trees, and I had one when I was younger, but it was one of those ones where like it was probably already dead it was like spray painted green. It was probably already dead when I bought it. It had the rocks that were glued to the pot, which is never a good idea, because again, it's probably already dead. So for the last 4 or 5 years, I've seen these bonsai trees at this kind of like little kiosk at the Renaissance Fair. Yeah. And I go, oh man, it would be wonderful to have one of those. But they're too expensive. So it just so happened we were there the last day, and my brother and I were kind of walking around. We were going to meet my wife and on the rest of the group, and I saw it. And I go, Tyler, we gotta check this out. And I asked him, I go, how much is that bonsai tree? And she goes, well, it's normally $80, but it's 40 today. And it was my birthday. So I go, Tyler, will you lend me 40 bucks? And he's like, no, I'll just get it for you. So I took home this 8 to 10-year-old Chinese elm, which is one of the
Wow.
experiences just walking around with like a tree in a pot, you know?
Yeah.
But since then, because bonsai literally means like tree, like tray, or tree and tray, I think. But since then, I've joined a bonsai. In Japan, they say bonsai, a bonsai club. I have a bonsai master, Pauline Muth, who's like helped me like shape the tree. And the more I learn about it, it's like any art, right? It has lessons that can apply right back to life. And the fact that it's like an art that's about nature is like doubly amazing. You know, when you want to get ramification out of the branches, you have to shape the branches either by hanging weights from them so they come down, or by hanging wire. And that's kind of like how we shape all aspects of our life. We're going to grow naturally, and we might go to the easy thing or the thing that's feeding us, but that might not always be the right direction. So we have to kind of bend ourselves to the right direction. If you want to get a big base, it's called a nabari, which is the root structure at the bottom. You have to spread out your roots. And I love telling the story. When I was at Mike Martinez's wedding, the deacon or whoever was the officiant was telling a story that the sequoias, she went to the national park, and the redwoods and the sequoias are the tallest trees. They're the tallest and the thickest trees in the world, hundreds of feet in the air, right? But they have no taproot. On most trees have a taproot, an anchor root that goes straight into the ground. So if a storm comes or heavy winds, that taproot keeps them to the ground.
Mm.
But the sequoias don't have that. How do they stand up among these storms when they're 100 feet in the air? They do it because they spread their roots really, really wide, and they interconnect with other trees.
Yeah.
And I love that lesson, because in physical education, right, you don't have to be on an island. That's what we should be doing. We should be spreading our roots really wide.
Yeah.
And intertwining with other people, so that when things come to our profession, we're standing strong, and no storm can knock us down, because, well, you know, we have such a deep root structure. So, I mean, I can go on and on about all the lessons.
I love it. That's awesome. That's a great analogy. That's an amazing analogy, actually.
Right? We have to be like the redwood.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a podcast that I listen to. I love Radiolab. I don't know if you listen to podcasts, but Radiolab is one of my favorites. And they did one about how the interaction between trees and the fungus in the forest, and just everything, and how it all interacts and actually like talks to each other and helps each other by providing nutrients when a sapling needs nutrients. It was so cool. And it's like this huge, like, complex living organism, you know, and everything is helping each other. And I love that analogy. Like, that's how we could be. We could totally be that way, just helping each other out. I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And you just made me think that that's how we can be with our students too, right?
Yeah.
Like, if we ask them to come to these tall concrete structures and just listen to what we say, somehow learn, and then go out into the world, that's not going to work. You know what I mean? Like, everyone can learn from everyone, us included, from our students, and vice versa, you know, from each other.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, definitely. And that's, you know, all about creating a community, right? Community in your class, starting with the individual, growing as an individual with the community in mind, and then helping the community just thrive and prosper. So yeah, absolutely. Definitely something that we can, a great message that we can teach our students as well.
And I would, if you know, it takes time, it takes dedication, but I would totally encourage you to join the Bonsai Club with me. And I hear that Saudi Arabia has a wonderful climate for more arid trees, right?
No, I think that's really cool. I've never had a bonsai tree, but same thing. I've seen them, and it's like, it's so interesting to me.
And it can survive generations. There's hundreds of year old trees, you know?
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome. So I will be following your experiences in your bonsai art. And maybe when I move back to the States, maybe I'll join.
I'm going to hold you to it. There's actually a Houston society, a Houston Bonsai Society.
I bet. Yeah, so, that'd be interesting. I'd totally be down with that.
I'm so excited.
So I know we're getting to the end of the hour. So if somebody had a question for you, if they wanted to reach you, what would be the best way to reach you?
Yeah, so I don't mind emails. It's just Brandon, BRANDON .Herwick, HERWICK at gmail.com. I would love for you to email me and either share some great things you're doing in your teaching, whether it be for phys ed or health or dance or about bonsai and how you're growing your tree. On Twitter, it's at Brooklyn Dreamer, and that's because when I got on Twitter, I was teaching at Brooklyn Dreams Charter School. So Brooklyn Dreamer, so holding back to my roots, keeping to my roots with that. Started at the bottom, now we're here. So on Twitter, and then I'm on Facebook, just at Brandon Herwick. I'm harder to find at the same name on Instagram, but I'm also I've been really fortunate to go to a lot of conferences and stuff too, and I would love to, I always love having conversations with people. It's been one of the coolest things. I was wearing my open shirt in the airport going to the PE Institute, and there was a slight delay. I had two people come up to me, one woman from like Buffalo, New York, and then one woman from New Jersey, and just saying like, "Hey, are you a phys ed teacher?" And it just so happened that one was going to the PE Institute, and I ended up driving with her from the airport to the PE Institute, which was cool. And then the other one was just coming back from like a random trip to Ireland, and we were just kind of talking about what her experience was in physical education and what mine was, and I love those connections because, like, again, we all have a story to share, and that story is so important to us and can be so important to each other for inspiration or motivation or to learn from or all the above.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. And I always like to leave our guests with the last word. So if you had a last final message that you would like to leave our listeners, please feel free to do that.
It's been a big point in my life to refocus on, to have a heart of service, to try to give as well as receive, and then always to bring a smile to share. Yeah. And then Jimmy Fallon says, keep smiling, keep loving, and let's keep on dancing.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Jorge. I really appreciate it.